Where should you stay when you visit Disney World? This is episode 11 of the Go Inform podcast. Welcome to episode 11 of the Go Inform podcast, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. This is day 3 of our 10 days to a better Disney World vacation. And I'm very happy to have you here with me today. My name is Maven. I am your hostess here on the show. And today we are talking about where to stay when you visit Disney World. And visiting Disney World has a lot of moving parts. And one of the first things that most everybody has to figure out is where to stay in Orlando when you go to visit. So today I'm going to give you kind of a big picture overview of what kind of options there are for you when you visit Orlando and some of the pros and cons of staying on-site at Disney World versus off-site, and some other general tips to get you started thinking about where you would like to stay, what kind of amenities and what kind of perks and such are going to be best suited for you. And hopefully this will help you move forward in your planning for your trip. So basically, when you're visiting Disney World, in my mind, there's kind of two separate options. There is staying on site at a Disney hotel on the Disney World property, and there's kind of everything else. So the way I'm going to refer to it sort of here on this episode is if you're staying in a Disney hotel, a Disney property on site at Disney World, I'm going to call that an on-site hotel. And if you are going to stay anywhere else, then that is off-site. So let's start by talking a little bit about what it's like if you don't stay in one of the Disney World properties, some of the pros and cons of staying off-site. So some of the reasons why people will stay off-site at Disney World is one reason is just to get a bigger place to stay. So a lot of people visit with big family groups or friend groups or whatever, or you just have a big family and a hotel room just doesn't sound like it's going to work for you. Orlando is one of the biggest tourist destinations in the world, so there is a ton of options for where to stay. And a lot of people will rent an entire house with a pool and a big full kitchen and lots of bedrooms. And that can be really great if you want to have a big group and all just stay in the same place. And there are houses all over Orlando that you can rent. So if being at Disney World is one of your main reasons for going to Orlando, look for a place, obviously, look for a place that's nearer to Disney World. And, besides a big house, there's condos you can rent. And of course, there are other hotels, lots of other hotels around Orlando. So you do have a lot of options for where to stay besides staying at Disney World. So some of the considerations that you might want to think about if you're going to stay off-site, probably the biggest one, one of the biggest ones is transportation. So if you listen to episode 9, which was the first episode in this 10-day series, where I kind of gave an overview about the size of Disney World and the scope, you're probably going to already know that there is a lot of places you could go in Disney World. It's not just like one entrance and you're at a park and that's all you do. There are a lot of different places you can go. And it's got its own, there's a freeway running through Disney World. It's like going to a city. So if you're even if you're staying on site, but especially if you aren't, make sure that you have an appreciation for how to get around when you get on that Disney World property and where you need to go. So you're going to want to look at specifically things like, where is the parking lot compared to the entrance to the park? And the biggest challenge here is at the Magic Kingdom Park, because the parking lot is it's pretty far away from the main gate of the park. And the way that you get to the park is by taking a monorail or a boat, actually, from the parking lot. So you need to make sure that you kind of have an idea about this, so you build in enough time when you are going to visit the park, so you don't waste a lot of time getting around from your car when you could be in the parks. So know a little bit of the lay of the land of Disney World, even if you're not staying on the property. And if you don't rent a car, you can also get around Orlando with Uber or taxi or Lyft. Those are all over the place. It's easy to get around without a car. And also a lot of the hotels that are in the area of Disney World have their own shuttles that will run to the Disney World theme parks. So do your research ahead of time so that you have an idea of how you're going to get to the parks and how much time that's going to take and so forth. Now, the other thing that is kind of one of the biggest in terms of not staying on property at Disney World is that Disney World guests who are staying in the Disney World hotels are going to get a lot of perks that are only available if you stay in a Disney hotel. And I'm going to talk about a lot of that in just a second here, but that is something that you give up when you stay off property. So if you haven't already got a place in mind where you're going to stay, keep listening so you can really make an informed decision about what the benefits are to staying on site at Disney versus off site. So let's get into what it's like if you stay on site at Disney World. So Disney World itself has over 25 different hotel properties that are Disney run and Disney owned properties. And besides that, there's something like somewhere between 5 and 10, I think, other outside hotel operators that have hotels on the Disney World property. Now, these hotels that are not run by Disney, even though they're on Disney World property, they don't have this, most of them don't have the same perks available that you get if you stay in a Disney hotel. So for the purpose of this discussion, when I'm talking about on-site hotels, I mean the Disney-owned, Disney-run hotels. One of the ways you can tell if a hotel is not owned or run by Disney is if you are looking it up online, like if you're looking at their reservation page. If it is not on the Disney website, like if you're on the Marriott website or Hyatt or Hilton or something like that, that is not a Disney hotel. So of the Disney hotels, there is a variety of different levels of budget and different levels of luxury and amenities and so forth. And Disney generally breaks these down into 3 different categories. So the categories that they use are value, moderate, and deluxe. So you can kind of guess just from the names of them what you can expect. Basically, a value resort is going to be less expensive. A lot of times the value resorts, depending on the time of year, but if you watch the deals, you can stay in a value resort for right around $100 a night often. And also, I should say, even though it says value, you might think cheap or, not very nice. Even the value resorts at Disney World are really nice. They're often like some of the most heavily themed resorts, and they're comfortable. The thing is, the rooms are just going to be a little smaller, and most of the value resorts, you're going to have a door that enters out to the outside rather than into an interior corridor. So that's one of the things that sets it apart. But really consider, if your budget's kind of tight, you can still stay on property at Disney World in one of these value resorts. The next level up is moderate, and moderate is kind of an in-between level. So moderate hotels the rooms tend to be a little bit bigger than the value hotels. The location, sometimes, for the most part, the location of the moderates are going to be a little closer to the theme parks. And the moderates will often have a few other amenities, like they may have a sit-down restaurant at the hotel, as opposed to the values generally just have a food court, although the food courts are pretty amazing. So don't count that out. But so the moderates are kind of just one more step up. Price range, this is, again, I'm just throwing numbers out, you guys, but just to give you an idea, the moderates usually something between $50 and $100 a night more than the value. If you're going at Christmas, these numbers are probably low. But if you're going at kind of a moderate time of the year, this should give you some kind of an idea. Now, the highest end hotels on the property are the deluxe hotels, and the deluxe resorts have, all the amenities you would expect from a high-end hotel anywhere. So you're going to have room service. The buildings are, all the room doors are going to enter into an interior corridor, and these are big hotels. The rooms are bigger, the lobbies are grand, and the deluxe resorts often have more than one restaurant. I think all of them do. So you're going to have restaurants on site, probably a cool place to go get a drink, and bigger rooms. So definitely the deluxe resorts are going to compare to, any of your kind of high-end hotels that you're going to find in any big city. But the difference is from this and staying in a fancy Hyatt somewhere or something, this is in Disney World. So even the highest end hotel, I think most people would agree, is the Grand Floridian Hotel at Disney World. Even at this one, which is really like a 5-star hotel, still awesome theming. You're going to see Cinderella in the lobby, during the day. Mickey might be hanging around, just so you're getting the Disney experience, whether you choose to stay at the high-end deluxe resort all the way down to the value resort. And so this kind of gets into what the benefits are of staying on site at one of the Disney hotels. And the first one is the Disney Bubble, which, now that I think about it, I should have added that into the common words and phrases yesterday. So I'll add that on the website. The Disney Bubble, what it means is it's when you get on the property at Disney World and you leave the outside world behind. And this is something that was behind the idea of Disney World from the very beginning. So when Walt Disney built Disneyland, there was nothing there except just orange fields and stuff. And after he built Disneyland, all this industry, all these hotels and restaurants and big busy streets and all this stuff sprang up all around. And it's really made it hard for the Disney team to kind of keep that outside world from encroaching when you're in the park, because you could, they don't want you to be able to see the McDonald's sign down the street when you're in the middle of Tomorrowland. So their big solution here, they're thinking really big, was we're going to go and buy a bunch of land in Florida, and we're going to make a world that is just Disney. And they did a pretty good job of it. And so When you cross under the sign that says welcome to Disney World, you really are going away from the real world. And I mean, that's why we go there, is to have a break, right? And so staying on property means that you get to be, and they call this the Disney bubble. You get to be in the bubble because you're not going to have a lot of other distractions. Okay, if you're driving around, you're still going to have traffic. But for the most part, when you're in the Disney bubble, you can just enjoy and you can just be there. And staying on site keeps you in it. So this is a big reason why a lot of people choose to stay on site. And there's actually a lot of other reasons to stay on site too, which are more about the convenience and efficiency of touring the parks. So one of the key things is that if you stay on site at Disney World, you're going to be able to get out of your car. And if you're like me, I happen to spend a lot of time in my car, and I really love not having to drive when I'm staying at Disney World. So the Disney World transportation system ranges from everything from buses to monorails to boats, trains too, probably some other stuff too. And when you're staying on site, there's buses, they're included in your stay. There's no charge or anything, that come on a regular basis that will take you between your hotel and any of the theme parks, and also into the Disney Springs area, which is the big shopping and entertainment and dining part of the world too. So you don't have to be worrying about getting directions when you're driving to figure out how to get to a park. You don't have to worry about parking, and it's all just included. So it takes care of a lot of that stress. In addition, anybody who's staying in the Disney World Hotel can use Disney's Magical Express bus, and this is a bus that will bring you to and from the Orlando airport, and it's included in your stay too. So lots of people take advantage of this as well, as a way to, for one thing, you're in the Disney bubble the second you get on that bus. So this is just one of those things where if you want to step off your plane, make your way through the airport, and you can get on that Disney bus, and you are having your Disney vacation already. So transportation is a big reason why a lot of people stay on site. Now, one other thing about the transportation, the buses run between the parks as well, and anybody can use those buses to travel between the parks. So if you're staying off-site and you park your car at Magic Kingdom and you go there for the morning and you have a park hopper ticket and you want to park hop over to Epcot, let's say, you don't have to move your car. You can just hop on the bus from the Magic Kingdom to Epcot, or hop on the monorail between the two parks. And even though you're staying off-site, no one's going to question your ticket or anything like that. Everybody who's on the Disney World property can ride those methods of transportation in between the parks. So even if you're staying off-site, that's a good thing to know in terms of planning your day and how to get around. Now, one of the things that I think is one of the most valuable perks that you get for staying in a Disney World hotel, one of the Disney hotels, is called Extra Magic Hours. And that's another one that I talked about in our commonly used words and phrases episode. Extra Magic Hours is also sometimes abbreviated to EMH. An extra magic hour is time that guests who are staying at on-site hotels at Disney World get to be in the parks when nobody else does. So you get exclusive time in the park without such a huge crowd. And depending on when you're traveling, this can be a really big benefit. Extra magic hours can be in the morning before the official park opening, or they can be in the evening after the park is officially closed. So whether you're an early bird or a night owl, there's pretty much any day of the week, there's going to be one park that's got some extra magic hours that you can take advantage of. Extra magic hours has always been something that my daughter and I have used in the mornings when we're touring. We travel far to get to Orlando, and we often don't have a lot of days. So first thing in the morning, we find is the best time to tour. We can do the most before the crowds get there. And having that extra hour is just a huge boost. We have accomplished so much in the first couple hours of the day because we've had this extra time to get into the park before the general public does. And I've got a post about this that I've written that I will link to in the show notes, so you guys can kind of get an example of the sort of stuff that we've been able to do because of extra magic hours. And by the way, the show notes are at goinform.net/11. And go over there and take a look. I'll link anything else that I mentioned here today. I'll put into the show notes there for you. And one other thing that's really, really advantageous for guests who stay on site at the Disney World hotels is the advantage that you get in making dining reservations and fast pass reservations for the rides. Guests who stay on site get to make these reservations. In terms of dining reservations, you get a nice little jump on the general public for making your dining reservations. And for fast pass reservations, you get to book your fast passes a month earlier than everybody else who's coming from somewhere else in Orlando. So these are some really big advantages for choosing to stay on site at Disney World. And I'm going to talk all about these two types of reservations in tomorrow's episode, which is going to be day 4 in our series here. So stay tuned for that one. That's going to be a really important thing to talk about. So besides the extra magic hours and the Disney bubble, there's also, I guess this is kind of overarching all of the things I've been talking about, but the convenience of staying on site is really nice. It does make things easier when you're planning to tour the Disney parks if you're just staying right there on site at one of the hotels. Something else that you guys need to be aware of is that the hotels are just as spread out around the Disney World property as the parks are. So no matter where you decide to stay, if you're staying on Disney World property, you're probably going to be fairly close to 1, maybe 2 parks, and you're probably going to be far, like a half-hour bus ride away from the other parks. It's just the nature of the size of Disney World. So when you are doing your planning, think about where you think you're going to want to spend the most time, and that might help you narrow down where you want to stay. I know this is a lot of options. It's hard to kind of figure it out, especially if you haven't been there before. One of my most recommended things for you guys to do is to go out and get yourself a copy of the unofficial guide to Walt Disney World. The unofficial guide is my Bible. I have it it's sitting on my desk right here in front of me. I use it for reference all the time. I'll take a picture and I'll put in the show notes for you guys so you can see. But I will also put a link to the unofficial guide on Amazon for you so you can click through and see what the book is. But you can find it most any bookstore. So get yourself an unofficial guide. The book has, in terms of hotel information, they have details about every single Disney World hotel and a lot of the other non-Disney hotels too. And everything from how far it is from every park to what the size of the room is, room layouts, everything you need to know, you guys. So pick up one of those books. It's really going to be useful for you in your planning. And if you're not such a planner and you're just like, oh my gosh, I can't figure this out, this is going to take too much time, call a travel agent. Travel agents can be super helpful, especially if you find someone who specializes in Disney World. They can help you figure out where to stay. They can help you with, tomorrow we're going to be talking about the sorts of reservations for other stuff like dining that you need to make. They can help you with that kind of thing, and they don't charge you for it. They just get paid from Disney or whatever they're booking. So really, this is one of those times in our world where we're so used to booking stuff for ourselves. This is one of those times where a travel agent can actually be super, super valuable. So if you're here on day 3 already thinking, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Then find a travel agent who can help you, and it will take so much pressure off your trip, and then you can just enjoy your trip. Okay, so off my soapbox about that. So I've given you a lot of positives to staying on site at Disney World. Some of the downsides, one is that for the most part, the accommodations at Disney World are going to be hotel rooms, or you can get suites and like studio kind of setup. So there are some options that are more like condos, like small condos. But if you have a big family or big group that wants to all be staying in the same place, like not just down the hall from each other, then you may want to stay off-site and look at, renting a big house or something like that. And the other thing is that you might decide you don't want to spend your entire trip in the Disney parks. And if this is the case, then you may not want to spend your whole time staying at Disney World, or you may want to stay off-site. So think about what your priorities are in Orlando and what you think you're going to be doing the most. And if the answer is you're going to want to be at Universal for all the days except for one that you're going to go to Disney World, then you may not want to stay at Disney World. If the answer is you want to spend half your trip at Disney World, you want to go visit the parks there, and then you want to spend the other half visiting the parks at Universal, then my advice for that is to stay on site at Disney World while you do your Disney World stuff, and stay on site at Universal while you do your Universal stuff. And Universal is a whole nother topic, which I've already started talking about here on the podcast. And if you guys have curiosity about that, go all the way back to episode 1, and you can find out about my tips for visiting Universal. But I also, in terms of where to stay, I have a post on the website about visiting. My post is about visiting Universal when you're staying at Disney World, but it really kind of works both ways. So I will put a link to that also in the show notes, which again are at goinform.net/11. So hopefully you guys have gotten an idea of sort of what the pros and cons are about staying on-site versus off-site at Disney World. And I know that there's not a ton, haven't given you details about every single hotel on site or any of that. That would take... This would be like a 6-hour long podcast if I did that this episode. So I recommend getting a guidebook, start doing your research, and think about what's going to work best for you. And we'll be talking more about this in future episodes too. But hopefully this has given you kind of a big overview of the pros and cons. Now, if you haven't already figured out, my advice is, if Disney World is a major destination for you, if that is a main reason you're going to Orlando, then I do recommend that you stay on site at Disney World during the days that you plan to visit the Disney parks. So if that is your entire vacation, or like almost all of your vacation, you're planning to stay at and do things on the Disney World property, visiting the parks and such, then I think that you should really seriously consider staying on site. There's just so many benefits to it, and just for the convenience and the Disney bubble too. It's really worthwhile. So definitely look into staying on site. So I think that pretty much wraps up this discussion today. Hopefully I've answered lots of questions, and I know I've raised some for you, but I hope this will help you go forward in your planning. Tomorrow, what we're going to talk about in our day 4 of our 10 days, we'll be talking about making reservations at Disney World for dining and for FastPass Plus. So these are 2 things that you really need to plan ahead on. And I want to give you kind of a big picture. Again, these episodes are all kind of big picture. I want to give you a big picture about why you should plan ahead for these things and how to start making a plan for where you think you're going to be when you are visiting Disney World. Thank you so much for listening today and for listening to the other episodes. I really appreciate having you along for this trip to Disney World that we're taking together. Be sure to hit the subscribe button on your podcast app so you don't miss any upcoming episodes. And if you have a minute to leave a review or a rating for the podcast on iTunes or wherever you like to rate and review stuff, please take a second and do that for me. That really helps other people find the podcast, and it's a new one. So your rating or your review can really make a difference. So thank you in advance for taking the time to do that. And I'm really glad to have you guys along for our 10 days to a better Disney World vacation. And I hope you guys have an incredible vacation.